What is it that's holding you back, keeping you from becoming everything that God has created you to be, living your purpose and reaching your destiny? Is it self doubt, feeling that you don't measure up to others? Perhaps it's fear or lack of resources, offenses and challenges, maybe even past or current circumstances. Well, I want you to know that these are pathologies, diseases of the mind that negatively impact how you think and perceive things that invade your everyday life. You can overcome these peculiarities and become conquerors, living in the purpose that God has for your life. The Bible in Philippians 4:13 teaches us, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Hello, I'm your coach Dee Johnson, and I'm going to share with you on how you can overcome these pathologies and be all that God created you to be on today's Watering the Seed. Seeds. If you caught part one, you know we unpack what happens when you compromise your moral compass to be with someone already married. But what about the moment you've been telling yourself is the goal? You know, that fantasy ending where they finally leave their spouse and you end up together. For some, that day actually does come. You know, they walk into your arms, rings off, bags in hand, ready to start fresh. At first, it feels like you've won. The waiting is over. No more sneaking around, no more hiding. You can be public now. But here's the question. When desire was the foundation and destiny was the justification, what happens when you actually have to live in the reality? Hey, Seeds, welcome back to another episode of Watering the Seed with Coach D. Jackson. I am so happy you've joined me for part two of The Cost of Compromise Confusing Desire for Destiny. When the cheating spouse lands in your arms. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. Welcome. You're now part of the garden we're growing over here at Watering the Seed. And without you, these words would just be echoes. With you, they become legacy. So keep coming back. Keep listening. Now, let's be honest. The early days were intoxicating. They're calling more, you're waking up together. You're not the secret anymore. You're the main person. It feels like the prize you fought for is finally in your hands. You imagine the wedding, the trips, the life you can now build without obstacles. But beneath the celebration is a shadow. There's a shadow, the unspoken truth that this relationship began in betrayal. You tell yourself, that was the past. We're starting fresh now. But the soil you're planting in still carries the roots of deception. And here's what most people don't see coming. The version of that person you knew while they were married is not the version you get when they're free. When they were with someone else, they were performing for you. The fun, the passion, the thrill. It was a performance. Now you're not the weekend getaway. You're not the secret walk in the park, the breakfast buddy, the sneaky call or the secret lover. You're the daily life now, and that calls for a reality check. Because daily life has responsibilities. It has bills, it has arguments and habits. It's got insecurities and all the unfiltered truths that the affair kept hidden. Okay? That's when you start noticing some things. The same avoidance patterns they used with their spouse, they're now using with you. The same way they justified stepping out before, they justify bending the truth now. The hero of your fantasy, that person starts showing cracks, and sometimes they'll stay. But you'd better believe if they're staying, there is something that you have and they want. And 9 times out of 10, it's not you. You might have thought, their old relationship was dead the day they left. Not so much. Ghosts don't die just because the house is empty. Energy lingers. Zebras don't change their stripes, they change direction. They still share children. The family ties are there. Financial responsibilities may be lingering, or mutual friends, they might have with their ex. That means you will feel the presence of the person they left, not in body, but in influence. The energy, the habits, it's constant comparison. Those are the ghosts, the energy, the presence of that person in their lives. It's not gone anywhere. And here's the tough pill. Sometimes they miss certain parts of their old life, not necessarily the spouse, even though sometimes they do, but not necessarily the spouse, but the stability of that relationship, the familiarity, the rhythm. And that nostalgia can make you feel you have to compete with that ghost, with that presence. And if you're trying to hold on to that person, you will find yourself competing with someone you never compared to in the first place. You were only a place filler, a placeholder. So, desire is powerful. It is. It can move you to chase something at all costs. But destiny can withstand the test of truth, time and transparency. If what you thought was destiny was actually desire in disguise, then living together in the reality will reveal that. You'll find that passion alone can't hold up under pressure. That lust doesn't automatically translate into loyalty. Love that started in lies, it often struggles to thrive in the light. What you did in the dark, once the light shines on it, it doesn't look or feel the same. It doesn't. People see you for who and what you really are in that storyline. And the storyteller you became, oh boy. Well, that job doesn't end. It doesn't end because once you become that storyteller, crafting your believable excuses for your deceptive behavior, you have to keep that story going, adding one false narrative on top of the other, until your story becomes this fictional novel crafted by a false reality of your own making. And in many of these situations, be it the spouse or the person or both, the people discovered that what they wanted wasn't the person. It was the feeling they had when they were wanted or were needed to fill a temporary role. This is what they were chasing. And once those feelings change, the relationship can feel like a stranger you fought to win but never really truly knew. And it pretty much is. It is just that. Seeds, here's the truth. Desire can cloud your vision, and in that fog, you can mistake the heat of passion for the light of purpose. Desire is powerful, but scripture warns us about letting it lead unchecked. Desire gives birth to sin, and sin gives birth to destruction. That's in James 1, chapter 1, verse 14. Desire gives birth to sin, and sin gives birth to destruction. And that means not everything that feels good is meant to lead your life. When someone lands in your arms after cheating, that's not proof you were meant to be. It's proof you were chosen in that moment. And moments change, they do. But destiny, on the other hand, is built in alignment and integrity and mutual truth, not in secrecy and stolen time. If you find yourself in this space right now, I'm not saying you can't build something good because the reality is that maybe you can. I've seen it happen. But what I am saying is that it will require radical honesty, accountability and humility to admit that the story didn't start the way it should have. It requires truth. Be true to yourself. So choose relationships where your worth is honored from the beginning, not justified after the fact, from the beginning. Okay, so let's talk about what healing requires. Whether you stayed or you left, whether you stayed or you left, what does healing require? So, healing doesn't begin with new relationships, okay? It doesn't. It begins with new hearts, okay? Scripture tells us to create in me a clean heart. Healing doesn't begin with changing your relationship. It begins with telling yourself the truth, not the polished version, not the version that protects your pride. The version that says, I made choices I didn't fully understand at the time. Or maybe you did understand it, your choices, but we're going to go with the idea that maybe you didn't understand your choices. So you made choices that you didn't fully understand at the time. And now you're responsible for what you build next. Okay? So say, I am responsible for what I build next. And sees, the goal isn't to be chosen, it's to be aligned. Because when your heart is clean, your love will be clear. And whether you stayed in the relationship or walked away, there are wounds that must be addressed because if they're not, they will follow you into your next chapter. Continuing with that fantastic fable story of believable excuses you've crafted. So, here's what moving forward actually requires. First, you need to be honest with yourself. I mean, radically honest with yourself. Before you can heal the relationship, you must heal the story you told, especially the one you told yourself. You have to sit with this with yourself in real time and ask yourself and answer truthfully because nobody knows you better than you know yourself. So you don't need validation from anybody. That's probably what got you in this situation in the first place, looking for validation. But you don't need validation from anybody. You need honesty, honesty from you. So ask yourself, what did I ignore because I wanted to be chosen? What did you overlook? You need to know that. Answer that for yourself. One of the biggest things in this it was this married person. Start there. You don't know where to start. Start there. One of the biggest things was dealing with a married person. Start there. And then ask yourself, what boundaries did I lower to keep this connection alive? What respectful thing about yourself did you put to the side to honor this deception? That's what that question is asking you. And again, one of those things is that you made yourself an option. You allowed yourself to be an option. But sit with yourself and ask yourself these questions. And then what part of myself did I abandon to make this work? Was it your integrity? Yeah. Start there. Deciding to engage with a person who is married, it dishonors you. It absolutely compromises your integrity. It dishonors you. You are devaluing yourself by doing such a thing. And the married person has lowered their value as well as yours. So start with your integrity. Stop romanticizing about this thing and see it for what it is. It's deception. See it for what it is. Radical honesty means no longer romanticizing or lying to yourself about how it began. You can't heal what you keep rewriting, especially if you're rewriting it in fiction. So now you need to hold yourself accountable, for your part in this whole thing, but without destroying yourself, without self-destruction, because that's not what we're here to do. We're here to help heal. Everybody this is real life. Life's for all of us. It does, and everybody makes mistakes. It happens. But you the healing is what really needs to happen behind the error, the healing. And over here at Watering the Seed, that's what we focus on. We focus on helping people be authentically who they are, which means standing in your truth, being authentic, healing yourself, aligning yourself so that you can walk in the purpose that God has for your life. So self-destructing is absolutely not something that we're looking to do over here. So in order to circumvent that thing, you have to hold yourself accountable. So accountability is not self-hatred. Understand that. It's self-respect. It's self respect. It's saying, I own my part without becoming my punishment. So, not to punish yourself, but to create some self respect or regain self respect after something like this. Blame keeps you stuck. Responsibility, it sets you free. So this is not about blame. We're not blaming ourselves, we're healing ourselves. Again, life happens. So if you stayed in the relationship, then accountability means acknowledging the harm done and committing to building something radically different. If you left, then accountability just means learning from what you tolerated so that you don't repeat it again. And now that you're standing in your accountability, it's time to rebuild trust. And that starts with yourself. You see, Seeds, most people focus on whether they can trust them again, the other person. But the deeper question is, can you trust yourself again? That's the question. Can you trust your own discernment? Your own boundaries. Do you trust your own boundaries? Do you trust your own voice? Healing means rebuilding the part of you that once ignored red flags and called them roses. And maybe maybe they did give you roses or flowers, or maybe you gave them to that person. That's part of the wooing, the fable story of believable excuses. But in any case, ignoring yourself, your boundaries, your beliefs, your gut, this is a red flag. Your energy sends signals. It does. It sends signals to you to let you know when something isn't quite right. Listen to that. Listen to that thing. Don't ignore it. No matter how nice or sweet and generous somebody is to you, bringing you flowers and candy and the sweet calls and the woo woo woos. No. If your gut is telling you, raising that red flag, something's not right here. Trust that. Trust that thing. Trust your own instinct. Okay? Now it's time to set new standards, and release old justifications. And this is where true growth actually happens. You stop asking, how do I make this work? And then you start asking, does this align with the kind of life, love and legacy that I want to build for myself, my family? Because ladies, listen, listen, ladies, your daughters are watching you. They're watching and they're taking notes. Men, your sons are watching you. And you best believe they're taking notes. You best believe it. So, when you align with the kind of life, love, and legacy you want to build, you move from being chosen in secrecy to being honored in clarity. You move from accepting explanations to requiring alignment, unless deception is the kind of life and legacy you want to teach your bloodline, because let's keep it 100. Let's keep it 100. Keep it real. We do have these types out here. And I mean entire families, bloodlines that operate in pure deception and betrayal, and they love it. They love it. It's a lifestyle for them. They call it normal. That's their normal. These people are very dark. They have dark souls, just bad energy. They love it. And they don't have a problem with it at all. But I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about my seeds, the ones that want to heal, those that want to live a better way. So choose the kind of life, love, and legacy that heals, that honors, your children, your bloodline. Choose that. Now, see, there's one more step in the process of moving forward. Moving forward requires this as well. And I know it might seem a bit strange, but it's real and it's very necessary in the healing process. It's allowing yourself to grieve. Even if you stayed in the relationship, you need to give yourself space and time to grieve. You see, grief isn't just for endings. Sometimes you grieve the fantasy of the relationship you had to release, you had to let go. The version of the love that you hoped this would be. The story, the love story. this was meant to be false narrative, but this was meant to be. You thought you were walking into this beautiful thing, and it wasn't what you thought it was. You have to grieve that. You have to grieve that. Healing requires mourning what never truly existed so you can build what can exist now, right now. So go ahead and lean into those emotions. If you have those emotions, lean into them. You don't have to hide or cover them up. Acknowledge them, lean into them, but don't stay there. Absolutely not. Do not stay there. Acknowledge your feelings. Be true and honest with yourself. Grieve the fantasy, but do not stay there. You see, Seeds, whether you stayed or left the relationship, the goal is the same. And that is to become a person who no longer confuses intensity with intimacy, desire with destiny, attention with alignment. Because the greatest healing isn't getting someone to choose you. It's not. It's choosing yourself with enough courage to never betray your own worth again. And remember, you are very valuable. You are. Treat yourself that way. Release the story that began in confusion and choose a future built on truth and alignment and self-respect. And self-respect. And as I wrap this thing up, I want you to reflect on a few questions that will help you with forward movement. And for those of you who listen to me often, you know that I believe living in your purpose requires alignment. And alignment requires forward movement. So with that said, here's a few questions to help with forward movement. You're going to ask yourself, what truth have I been avoiding because it would require change? Be honest with that. What is that? What truth have you been avoiding because it would require you to change? Because a lot of us don't want change. We fear change because, we fear the unknown. What would happen after the fact? And usually what you think will happen often never does. So be truthful with yourself and ask yourself what you're avoiding because it would require change. And then ask yourself, what standard am I now committed to never lowering again? Because lowering your standards, moving your boundaries, those are dishonoring yourself. That's when you dishonor yourself, and that leads to devaluing yourself. So, what standard am I now committed to never lowering again? And then what would it look like to choose myself without apology? Remember, Seeds, you don't need permission to be you. You don't need permission to be yourself. You don't need that. You don't need people to validate you. You don't need that. So what would it look like to choose yourself without an apology? You don't owe anybody an apology for being who you are, being authentically who you are. You don't owe apologies for that. Live in your authenticity. You don't need permission to be you. Okay? And you can apply these questions to other situations or facets of your life. You can. So, whatever you're dealing with, refer to these reflection questions. When answered truthfully, they'll help you gain real clarity. Real clarity. Seeds, remember this: marriage should be honored by all, not honored only when it benefits us, not honored only when it's convenient, but honored by all. So when you step into someone else's marriage, emotionally or physically, you're not just crossing a boundary, you're defiling something sacred. And anything built on defilement cannot produce peace. It cannot. The sexually immoral person sins against his own body. Remember that. Scripture tells us that. That means this isn't just about breaking a rule, it's about breaking yourself. And that's why after the thrill fades, you're left with shame and confusion and emotional fracture. Seeds, God is not trying to shame you, He's trying to shield you, cover you, save you from yourself, from bad choices. Because love built in truth never requires secrecy to survive. Never. Never. Desire is emotional, destiny is spiritual alignment. Guard your heart, for it determines the course of your life. If you don't guard it, something else will guide it. Trust me, it will. Something else will guide it. So guard your heart. And here are some affirmations I like you to take with you. I choose relationships. I choose relationships where my worth is honored from the beginning, not justified after the fact. And then I release the story that began in confusion, and I choose a future built in truth, alignment, and self respect. Seeds, take those with you and repeat them as often as you need to, as often as you need to. And as we close out today, I have to say thank you. Thank you, Seeds. Your support is more than numbers, it's connection, it's family, it's growth. Thank you for listening, for sharing, and for letting Watering the Seed be a part of your journey. We're taking this journey together. I told you that. We're doing this together. So thank you for allowing us to be a part of your journey. Thank you for that. This is Coach D saying, I love you. And until next time, water your seeds with truth, not betrayal.